ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaskar, my dear friends. This is video number 29 on Viveka Chudamani of Adi Sankaracharya. Topic of this video is Prarabdha for a Saint. People have questions about whether a saint undergoes the result of Prarabdha or not. So this query is clarified in this video. This video starts with verse number 446. Nididhasan shilasya bhaya prata ikshate brviti shruti retasya prarabdam phal darshanat. He who is an adept at meditation is yet seen to have external perceptions. Shruti says this is prarabdha at work. This can be inferred from actual results seen. Earlier in two verses it was said that to a man of perfection the vasanas created by his past actions cannot be powerful promptings because he has awakened from his egocentric misconceptions. If thus, through meditation and realization, his vasanas have been completely exhausted, an intelligent student would naturally ask a pertinent question. How is it that such an individual is seen to have his experiences in the world? We see that such a Mahayogi still has transactions with the world around him. He eats, he sleeps, he walks, he talks, he enjoys a cool bath in summer and a warm bath in winter. Therefore, if he has no vasanas, why should he continue to exist and gather experiences in contact with the world outside? In answer to this pertinent question, Sankara says, he who constantly practices meditation is certainly observed to have outer perceptions and experiences. This is explained by Shruti as being the result of his prarabdha. It can only be prarabdha, for we observe the man of perfection to have his quota of joys and sorrows when he comes in contact with the world. Verse number 447. Sukhade anubhavo yavatta prarabdmishyate flode kriya purvo niskriyo nahi kutrachit. As long as there is the experience of happiness, etc., the work of prarabdha is seen to persist. Every result is seen to have a preceding action. There can be no result independent of action. Why is this so? Why have the Upanishads indicated that the man of perfection gains the experience of nothing that is not the expression of his prarabdha? This is explained by the Acharya. As long as there is perception of happiness, sorrow, etc., Shruti acknowledges that prarabdha persists. The logical reason for this is that without a cause, an effect is impossible. We see the master experiencing joys and sorrows. Therefore, there must have been causes for them in the past. If all prarabdha ends at the moment of realization, there cannot be any experience of joy or sorrow. Since we see man of realization also experiencing joy and sorrow, there must be previous causes for these experiences. Every result is preceded by an action, and nowhere is a result seen accruing independently of action. Naturally, therefore, the conclusion is that when there are experiences of joys and sorrows for the wise man, they must have arisen from his own past actions. This is the declaration of Shruti. Verse 448. Ahem brahmeti vigyan kalp kotista arjitam satchitam vilayam yati parabodha swapan karmavat. I am Brahma. With this realization, the actions of 100 crore cycles come to naught like the actions in the dream on waking up. The idea is emphasized that there is total destruction of all vasanas that have been hoarded from the past, sanchita in the knowledge arising from deep contemplation upon I am Brahma. By this subjective realization that I am the supreme consciousness, all the imprints of past actions left on our personality get totally eradicated, completely erased. No more can the vasanas accumulated in millions of lives ever grow potent and manifest their influences on the personality of the individual who has realized truth. Thus, the accumulated vasanas sanchita get completely destroyed, such as the results of the activities done in a dream. On waking up, the results of all activities of the dream state completely cease to act upon the awakened individual. Similarly, for one who has awakened to the higher plane of consciousness in the knowledge I am Brahma, all the vasanas that have been gathered by him through the play of the ego in the entire past become null and void. The Upanishads also cry out the same. In the Upanishad, the Rishi says that all the vasanas of the man of perfection are completely fried in the fire of knowledge. Sankara interprets here that the Rishi could have meant only vasanas other than prarabdha. In short, the man of realization has to live no more the effects of his past actions. To illustrate this idea vividly, for the comprehension of the student, Sankara gives the example of the dream in the following verse. Stanza number 449. Yat kirtam swapan velayam punyam va papmullabhanam suptathitasya kintasya savragaya narkaya va. Can the meritorious acts or sinful deeds that a man has imagined doing in a dream take him to heaven or hell when he has awakened? In the previous verse, Sankara asserted that on waking to the higher plane of consciousness, all the vasanas that have been created in the past are totally wiped out, meaning they become impotent and can no longer yield any result. All the results of actions done in the past accrued to the personality through the endless lives that have already been lived are called Sanchita Karma. In order to drive home the point, an example is given which amplifies Vedantic contentions. The illustration given in this verse is very effective indeed. Whatever whatever activities have been done during the dream state of consciousness, Swapna Vilayam, irrespective of their merits or demerits, cannot have any reaction after the individual has woken up. The good actions of the dream cannot give one extra happiness on awakening, nor can the crimes perpetrated in the dream give one consequent sorrows in his state of awakening. In short, between the two states of consciousness, there cannot be any transaction, for the subjects that experience the two states of consciousness are totally different, meaning the waker as the waker is not available in the dream, and the dreamer as the dreamer is not there to experience the waking. In the same way, the egocentric individuality must have performed innumerable actions in his pilgrimage from one form to another. Yet now that the ego has ended in his newfound experience of the infinite consciousness as his own true nature, none of these fruits of actions, karma flaw, can ever affect him because the doer of these actions is not available anymore. Verse 450. Swam sang mudasinam prigyaye nabho yatha ne silashati cha yat kinchit kadachit vikarbhin. Being unattached and indifferent like sky, one who is realized is never concerned in the least about actions yet to be performed. Here the teacher wants to emphasize that the vasanas accumulated in the past are destroyed. Not only that, but as a result of realization, all the vasanas that are to mature in the future and yield their result in terms of joys and sorrows, agami karma, are also totally destroyed. On realizing the self, which is unattached and indifferent, udasina, to the activities taking place around the seeker's contact with the past is so completely annihilated that even the immature vasanas waiting for expression get totally roasted in the fire of knowledge newly kindled by the seeker's realization. The Atma, unattached and actionless, has been again compared with space. The Atma is described as being indifferent, udasina. This is to indicate that in its presence all the activities take place, but in none of the activities is it involved. In its present, in its presence, the matter vestures gather dynamism to act, but the vehicles always act according to their vasanas. When a man of realization acts, he is not affected at all at any time, yat kinchi kadachit, by the vasanas yet to mature in the future, the agami. Sankara calls it bhavi karma, actions that are yet to yield their fruits in future periods of time. In short, karma is done by the ego, and the ego alone can get its reward or punishment. When the doer of the actions, the vain ego, has been totally sublimated, who is to receive the result? When the ego is no more, the results of the karma done by the ego cannot take effect, and therefore no agami can function. However, the karmas that have been taken effect already, for the experience of which the man of realization has taken this embodiment, that is, the prarabdha, will continue to function, and this is the topic that Sankara hereafter takes up for elaboration. Stanza 451. Ne namo ghat yogen suragandhen lipyate tatha atmopadhi yogen tad menev lipyate. The sky, because of its contact with the jar, is not affected by the smell of the liquor in it. So too the Atma is not affected by the properties, the conditionings, because of its contact with them. All our activities are called karma. Karma is of three types. It is classified with reference to the past, present, and future. The total impressions gained by an individual through his activities and thoughts accumulated at the unconscious level of the mind are called sanchitam, acquired. The large number of vasanas within are all sanchita karma. Of them, a few become fructified, phalam, mukha, and surge forth to express. Because of such vasanas, we express ourselves the way we do. They are called prarabdha karma, that which has started yielding fruits. There are yet other vasanas which are awaiting maturity. They are yet to become effective. Such vasanas are called agami, yet to come. The sanchita, which is acquired in the past, and the agami, which is yet to come. Both are destroyed at the moment of realization. They can no longer affect the individual because he has transcended his little identification and has experienced the bliss beyond. The individuality which is to be accused for the past karmas is no more in that equipment. It has dissolved itself in the transcendental experience of the infinitude. In order to explain to us how the karmas do not affect the realized one, the teacher gives this example. Space is present everywhere. The contents in space can never contaminate it. A toddy pot may contaminate the surrounding atmosphere, the air, but no the space. The space in the pot cannot be conditioned by the contents of the pot. Similarly, even though a realized man lives in the body cannot condition him. At all times, he is conscious of his oneness with the infinitude. He being subtler than the subtlest, he cannot be conditioned by the vasanas of his past actions. But this body, being prarabdha, that which is the result of past actions which have already started yielding fruits, has to continue existing till it exhausts itself by itself. Stanza 452. Jnanodaya prarabdham karam jnanatri nashyati adatvaso phalam lakshe mudi srishtbanvat. That work which was performed before the dawn of knowledge and because of which this body is conjured up is not destroyed by the self knowledge without yielding its fruits, just like an arrow shot at an object. The vasanas which have started yielding fruits before the auspicious hour of realization will not cease to yield fruit after realization. At a particular stage in his pilgrimage of life, an individual realizes the truth. Sankaracharya at the age of 12, Vivekananda at 24, and Buddha at 42 are some of the examples. But before realization, the individual had already been conceived in his mother's womb and had started his earthly career. The great pilgrimage that has started is in itself an expression of the past vasanas. The karma that has started manifesting does not end because of dhyana. Because of its prarabdha, the body continues to exist even after realization. The body has to go through all its experiences because of its past karmas. From the standpoint of the realized man, it is prarabdha of the body and so it has to live through it. In our case, it is our prarabdha and hence we suffer through life whether we like it or not. The realized man is not involved in the experiences of the body. It is only others around him who get involved with it. Irrespective of the involvements of the subject, the prarabdha will not end without yielding its dues. The arrow that has left the bow must reach its target. After leaving the bow, it cannot be stopped. You may change your mind only before it leaves. Once it has left, it shall certainly reach its target. The Agami karmas are the total arrows in your quiver. Out of them you have taken one, fitted it to the bow and pulled the string. Even at that point you can stop it. But having pulled it up to the ear and shot it, you cannot bring it back. It has to pant and exhaust itself. Nothing can be done about it. This body is the arrow which has already started from the mother's womb and has been aimed at the tomb. From womb to tomb is its journey. In that flight, having started its career, nobody can stop it. To elucidate clearly the subtle distinction indicated here, Sankara gives in the following verse an unforgettable illustration. Stanza 453. व्याघ्र बुद्धया विनिर्मुक्तो बाणः पश्चात् गोमत्तो न तिष्ठति छिन्नत्येव लक्ष्यं वेगेन निर्भरम्. Thinking it to be a tiger, if an arrow is shot at an object, it does not then stop because it turns out to be a cow. It still pierces it with full force. A hunter, thinking that there was a tiger, aimed an arrow at it and shot it. As the arrow whizzed towards the target, the hunter recognized it to be a cow. Now, what could he do? By his revised knowledge, the arrow does not stop in its flight. Certainly, it strikes its target with full force. The knowledge that it is a cow does not change or modify the direction of the arrow. In the past, thinking that you are the body, you let loose many arrows of thoughts and desires. In the midst of this suffering, you realize the truth. Still, you are the son of your father, the father of your children, and the husband of your wife, or perhaps the wife of your husband. Once the thoughts have been whisked and willed in a particular direction, they have to take their course and come to manifestation in the given body. The body has to go through the convulsions of enjoyments and sufferings. No one can stop this. The agami and the sanchita can be eliminated, but not the prarabdha. That is the prarabdha of the body, not of the realized individual. For he who lives in it has no more identification with his body. From verse 454 onwards, Sankara discusses Prarabdha and how it works for the man of realization. Stanza 454. Prarabdham balvatram खलु विदाम भोगेन तस्य अक्षः सम्यक ज्ञान होता शनैन विल्लह प्राक संचिता गामा मीनाम ब्रह्मैक्य वीक्षः तन्मयतया ये सर्वदा संसिता सतेषां तंत्रितयं नहि कवचिदपि ब्रह्मेव तय निर्गुणम्. Prarabdha is very powerful for the realized man and becomes not only through the exhaustion of its fruits, while the Sanchita and Agami are destroyed in the fire of perfect knowledge. But none of these three affects them who have realized Brahma and always live, identify with it. They are truly the transcendental Brahma. Prarabdha karma is very strong even for those who have non-reality. The Agami and the Sanchita can end by the experience of the higher, but Prarabdha will end only when it has been lived through. Then, whether a person is a jnani or an agyani, he has to live through it. There is no escape. A jnani may have a luxurious smile on his face since he knows that he is not the equipment. An agyani, unfortunately, will make a long for long face, for he will not have the strength to grin and bear his lot. The fire of knowledge, kindled by the experience of reality, burns the vasanas that have been stored from the past and the vasanas that are yet to manifest in future births. That for the Gyanis, Prarabdha is still powerful, has to be carefully understood, for the statement has still points which should not be missed in a hasty reading. When Brahma and Atma are understood to be one and the same, the individual remains in that experience only. When I realize that the self in me is the self present everywhere, I remain absorbed in it. Tanmayatriya. No more do I identify with the BMI, but I remain there and there alone. Those who have lifted themselves from their identification with the BMI and are identified with the reality and remain there, then in those moments to such individuals there is no prarabdha also. Naturally, when I am not conscious of the body, mind and intellect, whatever the equipments might do in the world outside, whatever they may perceive or get as reactions, they do not affect me because I am my own self and fully engaged in it. My attention is totally turned toward the infinite. None of the three categories of karmas affect such individuals. At such moments of experience, they are Brahma alone. That Brahma is absolute, and being absolute, it has no properties. Thus, the three karmas, Sanchita, Agami, and Prarabdha, leave us only when the ego is completely dead. Vasanas can affect only the ego. The ego is liquidated in the transporting experience of the infinite. A man of realization becomes himself that Brahma which has no qualities. उपाधित्तादत्त में विहीन केवल ब्रह्मामनैवात्मनि तिष्ठतो मुनिः प्रारब्ध सद्भाव कथा ने युक्ता स्वपन अर्थ संबंध कथेव जागृत है the sage who is ever absorbed in his own self as Brahma, non-dual and free from limitations, the question of the existence of prarabdha is meaningless, just as the question of a man having anything to do with dream objects is meaningless when he has awakened. The man who has awakened to the higher plane of consciousness has no more body, mind, and intellect conditionings. The feeling that I am the body, the mind, and the intellect is not in him. Egocentric individuality cannot maintain itself when the identification with the body, mind, and intellect is withdrawn. When the individuality becomes unconditioned by the equipments, it becomes the alone, Kevala. The alone expressing through the BMI is the personality, the ego. As an ego, when I look into the world outside, I find a world of endless objects, emotions, and thoughts. The multiplicity is perceived only when I look out through the equipments of the body, mind, and intellect. The man who is capable of analyzing life in the world and also his own experiences is a man of reflection. When such an individual lives in his own self as Brahma, he is not affected by his prarabdha. Enjoyment of prarabdha and experience of the infinite are on two different planes of consciousness. The wealth of the king cannot help him when he dreams of himself as a beggar. The king of the waking state cannot help the beggar of the dream, though they are essentially one and the same person. How can the individual who has withdrawn from the BMI be molested by the OET? Stanza number 456. नेहि प्रबुद्धे प्रतिभास देहे देह उपयोगिन्यपि च प्रपंचे क्रोहंता ममता मिदंता किंतु स्वं तिष्ठति जागरेण. He who has awakened from sleep has no idea of I and mine with respect to the dream body, nor for the dream objects realized related to it. He lives ever awake as his own self. The same idea of the previous verse is being elaborated for vivid picturization in the student's mind. On waking up, no one considers himself to be the dream body. In the delusory dream body, the I-ness is not there for the waker. The things that pertain to the dream body and the dream objects will not be considered as mine by the waker. I-ness, ahamta, the feeling of I-ness in the body will not be there when the individual has awakened to the higher plane of consciousness. On waking up, the feeling of I-ness towards the dream body will vanish. Myness, mamta, the feeling of myness towards the objects around will not be there on waking to the higher plane of consciousness. The dream house is the dream wife, the dream wealth, and the experiences that have been lived through in the dream will not cause the feeling of myness to the waker. Thisness, idamta, the world around that is cognized and declared as this, will not have any sense of reality on waking to the higher plane of consciousness. On waking up, the dream world loses all its reality. On waking to the higher plane of consciousness, I shall no longer consider my dream body to be me. The dream belongings as mine and the dream world as something that really exists. While I was dreaming to the dreamer in me, my dream body, my dream belongings, and my dream world were real. When I wake up, I do not have ahimta in my dream body, nor mamta in the dream possessions, nor idamta in my dream world of context. In them there is no reality anymore. The prarabdha of the dream world does not affect the waker. Similarly, prarabdha cannot affect the man who is rooted in the higher experiences. Verse 457 ने तस्य मिथ्या अर्थ समर्थन इच्छा ने संग्रह तज्जगतो अपि दृष्ट है तत्र अनुवर्ती यदि चेन्मर्षार्थे न निद्रया मुक्तस्य इतिष्यते ध्रुवम्. He does not wish to prove the unreal objects to be real, nor is it observed that he maintains the dream world. If he still holds on to the unreal objects, he is emphatically declared to be not yet free from sleep. In the dream, to the dreamer, the dream experiences are vivid, true, and real. After waking up, the individual will not have any desire to maintain the dream world, to acquire the dream objects, and to protect the dream wealth. Having woken up, you are not ashamed to leave the dream. You do not strive to take up the dream again. On waking up, you realize that the dream is false. In case you have any anxiety or excitement for the dream, then it is clear that you have not waken up from it. If you have woken up, the dream objects will hold no fascination for you. Similarly, on realization, the objects of our waking world have as much significance as the dream objects have for the waker. Stanza 458 तद्वत् परे ब्रह्मणि वर्तमान सदा आत्मना तिष्ठति न अन्य दीक्षते समर्थी यथा स्वपन विलिखितार्थे तथा विदः prashanmochanodam. So too the man who remains identified with the eternal reality does not perceive anything else. Just as one remembers having seen the objects in the dream, the realized man remembers his day-to-day acts of eating, etc. The relationship of the individual who is living in the higher plane of consciousness with the world of OPT is similar to that of the waker with his dream world. In moments of realization, he sees nothing except consciousness. In my waking state, I do not see anything of the dream world. The dream world has rolled away and has dissolved into myself in another plane of consciousness, the waking. In case you possess memory of the dream, you remember it as non-existent and as of no consequence. That is, you remember things which were never actually there but which were only imagined by you in your dream. Similarly, the man of realization goes through the world. His activities such as eating, breathing, sleeping, etc. take place even though he is not involved in them. The man of perfection goes through the activities of maintaining the body exactly like going through his dream experiences. Stanza 459. Karmana nirmito dehe prarabdam tasye kalptiyam Nana dera atmano yuktam nevatma karam nirmitah. The body has been fashioned by prarabdha, so one can accept that prarabdha relates to the body, but it is not reasonable to attribute it to the self, for the Atma is never the result of any earlier work. A man who has realized the truth is one who has sought and discovered successfully his identity with the self. Having thus awakened to the higher plane of consciousness, he can no longer be involved in any way with the world of OET, which belongs to the lower plane of consciousness. In the two preceding verses, the Acharya labored to point out the truth of this statement by comparing it with the experiences of a waker with reference to the dreamer that he was before. Having quoted that prarabdha cannot be for the man of realization, the fact still remains that even after samadhi, he is found to be a member of society going through the various joys and sorrows of his existence. A Ramakrishna suffers from cancer, a Christ suffers his cross, one Acharya is claimed and proclaimed as the greatest and the noblest, and therefore he lives as a pontiff in luxurious circumstances on a golden throne under silken umbrellas, while yet another master seems to live with nothing to clothe him and without assurance of his next supper. How is this explained? Sankara in this verse gives us the clue. He says the egocentric, desire prompted, deliberate activities of the past leave behind their impressions. Prompted by these impressions, vasanas, the individualized ego seeks a conductive physical environment where it can live and fulfill its residual vasanas. Hence, he does an appropriate body and manifest himself under the required environments. Thus, the body stands forth from the actions of the past, and since prarabdha is a resultant of past actions, it can be considered that the body is the product of prarabdha. Therefore, prarabdha belongs to the body alone. It is the destiny of the body, gross, subtle, and causal, that it should suffer or enjoy, that it should be in conductive environments or otherwise. When the teacher says that the prarabdha is not for the man of realization, he means that there is no prarabdha for the self, as the self is not created by past actions. The self was, is, and shall ever be. All actions takes place in the self, with the self, by the self, and for the self. Since the man of realization is one who has discovered his perfect identity with this supreme infinite self, to him indeed there cannot be any prarabdha. The same idea is expressed so vividly in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna declares the self to be unborn, eternal, permanent, the most ancient. It gets not killed when the body is killed. In Kathopanishad also the same idea is expressed. The Atma is beginningless, Anadi, endless, Ananta. Everything springs forth into birth and disappears in its death in the medium of consciousness only. Destiny can only pertain to that which has birth and death, and not to the eternal substratum upon which the illusion of birth and death is taking place from time to time. Stanza 460. Ajo nitya sasvat iti brute shruti mogvak tadatam na tishtatoshya kutay prarabdha kalpana. The Atma is birthless, eternal, and undecaying. Such is the absolute declaration of Shruti. How can Prarabdha be attributed to him who lives ever identify with that? Having given in the previous verse the logical reason why the Atma has no prarabdha, here Sankara supports his rational argument by quoting the scriptures. In Vedanta, conclusions arrived at by mere reasonings are not in themselves acceptable, since the intellect itself, a product of delusion, can get more and more confused by its own illusory perceptions. Therefore, in the science of reality, as conceived by the great rishis of yore, the rational conclusions arrived at logically by an intellect, when supported by similar conclusions declared by the scriptures, become doubly guaranteed and therefore totally acceptable to the students. In the verse under commentary, the teacher gives authority of the scriptures, Shruti Pramana. Here a verse from the Kathopanishad is quoted. Birthless, eternal and changeless is the nature of the self, says the Upanishad, and the words of scriptures are infallible. Amog Vak. Stanza number 461. Prarabdham Siddhati Tada Yada De Atamna Sithiti De Atam Bhavo Nivishte Prarabdham Tajya Tamatah. Only as long as one lives identified with one's body can one accept prarabdha work, but no one accepts that a man of realization ever identifies himself with his body. Hence, in his case, prarabdha work should be rejected. The scriptural truth quoted in verse 460 is thus sandwiched between logical reasons. Since the body is a product of past actions, it should continue enjoying and suffering its fruits, and those who identify with their bodies naturally continue to suffer. A man of perfection is one who has ended his misconceptions and is therefore not identifying with his physical equipment and more. And since he has no contact with his physical body, the tragedy, the tragedies and comedies of the body will not affect him. Sankara concludes here and commands us give up the concept of all prarabdha working in the case of a man of perfection. Stanza number 462. शरीरस्यापि प्रारब्धकल्पना भ्रान्तिरेव हि अधस्तस्य कुतः सत्वं सत्तस्य कुतो जनिः अजातस्य कुतो नाशः प्रारब्धमस्तः कुतः. To contribute prarabdha even to the body is decidedly an illusion. How can a superimposition have any existence? How can the unreal have a birth? And that which is never born, how can it die? So, how can prarabdha function from something unreal? More precise and authoritative, more eloquent and impressive than an international constitutional lawyer is Adi Sankara here, cascading an irresistible logical thinking. Not only can there be no prarabdha for the self, but for a man of perfection, even his body can have no prarabdha. To gainsay this would be ridiculous, for he, in his absolute state of realization, does not perceive or recognize the existence of the physical body. When you start pondering deeply, says Sankara, you cannot accept that there is prarabdha even for the physical body of a man of perfection. This assertion is now explained in detail. The superimposed snake is apparently visible only to a deluded observer. It is very well known that it has no reality. The play of the three bodies is but an illusion superimposed upon the self. So, where is reality for the body? Again, that which is unreal can never be born. The snake in the rope has no birthday. The body that is superimposed upon Brahma cannot be said to have been born due to prarabdha. The ghost on the post was never born, so it can never die. The unborn is undying. The body that is never born has no death or decay. Birth and death of the body are both superimpositions on the self. Summing up his argument, Sankara, with biting ridicule, asks, how can there be prarabdha for the unreal, which naturally is unborn and consequently non existing? In short, the witty Acharya indicates that prarabdha cannot be either for the self or for the body, which is the not self. It can only be in the imagination of the deluded perceiver. Stanza number 463. ज्ञाने अज्ञान कार्यस्य समूलस्य लयो यदि तिष्ठत्ययं कथं देह इति शङ्कावतो जडान् समाधातुं बाह्य दृष्टया प्रारब्धं वदति श्रुतिः. If the effects of ignorance are destroyed, root and all, by knowledge, how does the body continue to live? Shruti, from a relative standpoint, hypothesizes the work of prarabdha for those fools who entertain such doubts. In this verse, the Acharya tries to explain why even the Upanishads discuss this great concept of prarabdha working upon all bodies, including that of the man of perfection. This is done only from a relative standpoint to quieten the foolish doubt of an ignorant student. The student sees the body of the master continuously functioning in the world, and naturally, therefore, he feels that the master continues living because of his prarabdha. Little does he understand that from the lofty panoramic vision of the master, there is no body, that he is but the pure self, the witness of all. Thus, the Upanishads compromise and condescend to accept the concept of prarabdha for the man of realization only to help the dull ones who are still living in the realms of plurality. This is given out only from a relative aspect, vyavahara ritaya. From the absolute point of view, There is no prarabdha for the perfected man, for he is one with Brahma. Stanza number 464. Ne tu de adi satte bodhnaya vipischitam yatah srute abhipraye परमार्थक गोचर है. The idea of prarabdha has been expounded by the Upanishads not for proving the reality of the body, etc., for the man of realization, because the Upanishads are without exception striving to point out the one supreme reality. Sankara concludes his discussion and says that the perceivers of plurality, the Dvaitins, quote Upanishadic passages that sanction the Prarabdha theory to prove that even the man of realization has body consciousness and therefore there exists a world of matter other than Brahma. Sankara here takes away the very plank from under the feet of the Dvaitins. He says that the Upanishads condescend to recognize the play of Prarabdha only out of the infinite grace to accommodate fools in their early stages of preparedness that they may later accept the total vision of the Absolute One. The Acharya says that any student of the Upanishads can easily understand that by and large the anxiety of the scriptures is to communicate to him the one reality, the Brahma. Now follows a team of 7 verses, all of them repeatedly declaring the nature of the Atma to be the one, immutable, undecaying, infinite, eternal substratum for the universe. Sankara, when he talks of the supreme reality, forgets the audience he is addressing and gets irresistibly carried forward by the impulsive joy of the infinitude. He waxes eloquent upon the nature of the self that he himself is living vitally in his own heart. At this stage I conclude this video. Thank you. Next video number 30 will start with the topic there is no plurality and stanza will be 465 to 471. Thank you.